Every family, every team, every company has to have a philosophy, a vision, a mission. And here with the Miami Heat, we've had one mission ever since I've been here. It's very simple, okay? And I think it covers the board if you have any kind of an imagination. Our mission in Miami was that we wanted to become the hardest working, best conditioned, most professional, unselfish, toughest, most admired team in the NBA.
It's intensity. It's intense.
Yeah, that's a fact.
It's structured. You follow the rules. You don't break code. Pat Riley don't play that.
Factor to you as you solidified this decision to be here?
To tell you the truth, it's the culture that I hear about all the time. The work that you put in every single day, the winning habits, the winning ways. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a part of that?
I think I fit here. The way that they work, the attitude that they go about everything, it's me in a nutshell.
This is Heat culture. Jimmy Butler, exhausted at the scorer's table after playing 47 minutes in Game 5 of the NBA Finals. A player who was counted out, doubted, and disregarded, yet in Miami, he finally found a home. The one place in the NBA where his hard work isn't just respected, it's required. In the words of Heat legend Dwayne Wade, he's a Heat guy. For years, we've heard this term Heat culture get thrown around the NBA. But what if that very culture that the Miami Heat is so famous for and has built for the past 2 decades is the very culture that is tearing the team apart today? You cannot talk about Heat culture without talking about Pat Riley. Pat Riley did not just build Heat culture, he literally embodies what Heat culture is. For people that don't know about Pat Riley is a New Yorker, and if you know anything about New Yorkers, they are gritty people, very scrappy, and they will get what they want no matter what they have to do for it. And that's who Pat Riley's been his entire life. After a successful basketball career in Kentucky, Pat was drafted with the 7th overall pick in the 1967 draft by the San Diego Rockets. After 3 years with the Rockets, he was selected to the Portland Trail Blazers in 1970 of the expansion draft. Also, fun fact, Pat Riley was also drafted by the Dallas Cowboys as a wide receiver, which is crazy to me. He never played football in college either, so I have no clue how that happened, but that's besides the point. Pat would then get traded from the Blazers that same year he got drafted to the Los Angeles Lakers, where he would spend the majority of his career. But it was the second year with the Lakers that would really change Pat's life forever.
I was told by Bill Sharman that if I wanted to make the team in 1971, that I had to be the best conditioned athlete in training camp. And he said, if you're the best conditioned athlete in training camp, he said to me, you're not going to play either. I just want to make sure I know I've got somebody who's in great shape that I can put out on the court and take a hard foul or guard the other team's best player. But Pat, you probably won't play. But if you're not in the best shape, you're not going to make the team.
This message that he got was really the defining principle of Pat's career. Be the hardest working and best conditioned player on the court. After a long NBA career, Pat became a broadcaster for the Lakers and eventually became an assistant head coach for the Los Angeles Lakers. And after just a couple seasons as assistant coach, he was then promoted to head coach. Well, co-head coach, because him and Jerry West were supposed to share head coaching duties, but Jerry West said he didn't want to do it. So basically Pat was the head coach. Pat became an icon in LA. He really instituted the Showtime era with Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. 4 NBA championships in LA as the head coach of the Lakers. Some basketball fans have Pat Riley as the greatest coach of all time. Others say Phil Jackson. It's really kind of whatever your preference is, but regardless, he's arguably a top 1 or top 2 coach of all time in the NBA. Pat Riley's teams were always known for their intense practices and just being the hardest working team in the NBA. There's even a story back in 1989 where Brian Scott was playing for the Lakers and he actually missed game 1 of the finals because he got hurt in practice, because that's just how intense the practice were under Pat Riley. And then after his Laker coaching career, he would go over to New York, and that's where he would really show his grittiness with Patrick Ewing and John Starks. After 4 seasons with the Knicks, Pat Riley was heavily recruited to go over to the Miami Heat and join them as the head coach and president in 1995. Now, at this time, Miami was a organization that really didn't have an identity. No one really knew what the Heat were, and they needed to kind of jumpstart something in Miami. With the new owner, Mickey Arison, coming in, he had his eyes set on Pat because he knew that Pat Riley could come in and really set a culture in Miami. So he gave him full keys to the team and allowed him to do whatever he wanted. When Pat Riley came over, he wanted to bring over that mindset that he's always had with New York and LA. But with full ability to do whatever he wanted, he was able to make this into a law in Miami. The Miami Heat were going to be the hardest working, best conditioned, most professional, unselfish, toughest, meanest, and nastiest team in the NBA. Because that's just who Pat Riley was. There's no greater example of this than in the 1999 playoffs when Pat Riley came into the locker room at halftime and told his players they have to want it as bad as they want to breathe. And then he stuck his head in a bucket of water and stayed there so long that a lot of staff members and players were concerned if he was going to be okay. And then came up and said, you have to want it more than you want to breathe. That's what Heat culture was. That's who Pat Riley was. Heat culture is described as the hardest working, best conditioned, most professional, unselfish, toughest, meanest, and nastiest team in the NBA. And since 1995, the Miami Heat have been just that. From day one of training camp, new Heat players are greeted with knee pads and mouthpieces because the expectation is that you're going to go to war.
I got handed my jersey, practice shorts, socks, and then you get your knee pads and a mouthpiece. And I was like, nah, I don't need that. Like, I don't wear knee braces or mouthpiece. He was like, yes, you do. I'm like, bro, I've been in the league for 15, 16 years. Like, I've had success. And he was like, no, you need that.
Former Heat assistant coach David Fitzdale said that practices should be harder than games. They should feel like war, and they were indeed harder than game. There are countless stories of Heat players talking about how hard they trained during training camp or talk about their weight requirements when they joined the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat conditioning is brutal. The Heat have a body fat rule that I don't know if many other teams in the NBA have, but they have a body fat rule when you join the Heat. Every player has to be under 10% body fat in order to play or even make the team. And if you don't get under 10%, well, I don't know. From all the stories that I saw, I didn't find a single player talking about what happens if you don't make it. I just assumed that everyone ended up making it because that was just the expectation in Miami. But I do know the Heat had a rule where if you put your hands on your knees, you were going to get a $100 fine if that was in the game or in practice because you were tired. So I'm just guessing that it was some type of strict rule if you didn't make body fat. But anyways, Miami Heat conditioning is very, very brutal. Now, beyond just conditioning, Heat culture is also about loyalty. And in the modern NBA, we obviously know there's no loyalty in the NBA. Just look at this year's trade deadline. Luka got traded in the middle of the night. Like, there's no loyalty in the NBA. But in Miami, that is something that they pride themselves on. Everyone from the staff to the players all kind of buy into this loyalty idea. Pat Riley has been the president of the team since 1995. Their general manager has been with the organization for over 30 years. Eric Spoelstra has been the head coach since 2008. And Udonis Haslem played 20 seasons for the Miami Heat before he retired a couple seasons ago. And I think Udonis is the perfect example of what Heat culture is. He is someone that literally embodies Miami Heat culture. In 2002, he went undrafted and he got picked up by the Miami Heat. With no guarantee of actually getting any type of playing time, Udonis just grinded and worked until he was able to see the court. By the end of his first year in the league, he was a stable part of the Miami Heat lineup, and he continued that for most of his Heat career. He's been through every era of Heat basketball. He was there with Shaq and D Wade and won a ring in 2006. He was a starter during LeBron, D Wade, and Bosh's era. He's even been there during Jimmy Butler's run, even though he got limited minutes and really was there just as a player coach. Udonis Haslem is the Miami Heat. He was a guy who was undrafted and worked from day one to make a name for himself. He is what Heat culture is all about. And his story isn't the only story like this from the Miami Heat. Back in 2023, when they went to the NBA Finals, they were led by Jimmy Butler, but they also had 3 undrafted players that started on their lineup: Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, and Caleb Martin. They all played big minutes, and Caleb Martin almost even won Eastern Conference Finals MVP because of how well he played. And all 3 of these guys were undrafted, and every team in the NBA basically overlooked them. But that's just what Heat culture was about. Status meant nothing there. It just mattered about how hard you were willing to work. As great as these undrafted stories are, Pat Riley knows better than anybody else that you need stars in the NBA to win. But the problem with bringing in star players is, how do you get that guy to buy in to Heat culture? Is there a star like that in the NBA that will just buy into team first mentality and give away his pride to help the team out? The thing about Pat Riley is, as great as he is a trainer and how much he likes gritty players, he's always been known as someone that went star hunting. Back in 2004, he brought in Shaquille O'Neal, and 2 years later, he was winning a championship with Dwayne Wade. So in 2010, when the Heat were looking for something else, he struck big again, forming one of the greatest teams we've seen in our generation. LeBron James, the best player in the world at the time, decided that he wanted to join the Miami Heat alongside Chris Bosh, who had just recently signed, and Dwayne Wade, forming the Big Three. Overnight, the Miami Heat became the most watched, the most hated, the most polarizing team in the entire NBA. But LeBron wasn't like Wade, who had to kind of prove himself in college. He also wasn't like Bosh, who kind of got overlooked. No, LeBron was not a Heat guy at all. This was a guy who was the most talented player every team he's ever played on. The number one pick, the chosen one, he has been called, the best player in the world, the biggest persona. He had everything working for him. He didn't need team culture. So how was he going to get him to buy into Heat culture? LeBron also at the time was very used to having power, like most stars did in the NBA, and he wanted to fire Eric Spoelstra, who was the head coach of the Miami Heat, because he just didn't like him and didn't like the way he was coaching, I guess. And he wanted Pat Riley to come. So he went with Pat Riley and said, hey, I want you to fire Spo. But Pat Riley wasn't going for any of it, because Eric Spoelstra wasn't just a regular head coach. He was actually a coach that Pat Riley picked out himself. Before becoming a head coach of the Miami Heat, Spo was virtually a nobody. This is someone that played a little bit of professional ball overseas and then became a film guy for the Miami Heat. And if you know anything about the film guys in the NBA, you probably don't. They don't make any money. Like some actually make like $15, $20 an hour. Like they don't make any money. You can't really make a career out of being a film guy. But this guy, it was a film guy and a scout, but this guy really just loved the game of basketball. So you'd watch hours and hours and hours of Heat basketball. And that persistence, that hard working, that grit that Pat Riley saw in him promoted him up to be an assistant coach, where he would learn under the Heat for a while. And when it came time for Pat Riley to step down and say, hey, I'm done coaching this team, I want to just be a president going forward, he knew that Spo was going to be the perfect guy that he wanted to take over. Like I said, at the time, he was a virtual nobody. He was the youngest head coach in the NBA when he took over. And it was honestly a risk for Pat Riley, but Pat Riley knew that this guy was Heat culture and he was going to keep that style of play with the Miami Heat. The problem was, LeBron was at a point in his career where a experimental head coach that was training and learning how to become a star wasn't going to work for LeBron. So he wanted him out, and rightfully so. I mean, if I'm 26, 27, and I'm about to hit the prime of my career, I just came here to win championships, and we have a big three. Don't give me a guy who's a second-year head coach who's just learning how to coach. But in Miami, stars don't rule it. Pat Riley rules it, and he got overturned, and Eric Spoelstra was a head coach. Ideally, it ended up being a success as they won 2 championships in 4 years. After the 4th year, LeBron's contract was up, and there was a lot of rumors if he was going to stay or not. Miami seemed like the perfect place. You have a great structure there with a great president, a good head coach, and you have D Wade and Bosh still there, and D Wade's a little bit out of his prime, but Bosh was still in his prime. It didn't really make sense for LeBron to leave. But you also have to think about this. LeBron wanted more power. He wanted more ability to control what he wanted around his team as far as his coach, the other stars, and how the organization was ran. He just wanted a say. But in Miami, that doesn't happen. The stars don't run this team like every other team in the NBA. Pat Riley runs his team. And after butting heads for a while, LeBron left and said, I'm going to go back to Cleveland. You can look at it 2 ways. Either A, LeBron is being a conceited superstar who should have just bought into team culture and stayed with the Miami Heat, or B, Pat Riley was being a dictator and wasn't listening to his superstar like every other team did in the NBA. Regardless of how you want to take it, it was always clear that LeBron wasn't a Heat guy. He wasn't a guy that Pat Riley would say is the embodiment of Heat culture. It was probably bound to happen that they were going to break up. So let's draw the perfect Miami Heat player. This is a player who had to be overlooked on draft night, a player with incredible work ethic, a player who loves practicing until his shoes fall off. He needs to only care about winning and making the team better. And last, he needs to be able to humble himself and fit into the Pat Riley system. There are not many guys like that who will fit that system in the NBA and can also lead a team, except for one guy. The one guy that Dwayne Wade has labeled a Heat guy.
Factor to you as you solidified this decision to be here?
To tell you the truth, it's the culture that I hear about all the time. You know, the work that you put in every single day, the winning habits, the winning ways. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a part of that?
Jimmy Butler is honestly the most Heat culture star like you can ever think of. I don't think I could make a better Heat culture star unless it was a guy who was maybe undrafted and became a superstar than Jimmy Butler. This is a guy at age 13 who was kicked out of his house by his mother and was homeless, bouncing from friend's couch to friend's couch. Basketball was really the last thing on his mind during high school because he was just trying to figure out how he was going to survive each day. But he had some natural talent, but his jumper was very unpolished, so Jimmy didn't end up getting a big scholarship from any school and ended up playing JUCO basketball. After 2 years of JUCO, Jimmy Butler decided to transfer to the University of Marquette. And it wasn't for basketball. No, Jimmy went there because he thought it was a good school for education and he was planning on getting a regular job just like everybody else right out of college. But it wasn't until his former teammate Wesley Matthews went to the league and said, "Hey, Jimmy, honestly, you could be one of these guys." And that was the spark that Jimmy needed, and he became the hardest working player on that entire team. Still with a very unpolished game and a very broke jump shot, if we're being honest, Jimmy drugged that team to the Sweet 16 and made a magical playoff run. But despite his success in college, due to his lack of having a jumper as a guard, he fell to the late first round. Like most of his life, Jimmy was once again going to have to grind for his spot in the NBA, as when he got to Chicago, he was looked at as an energy guy that would play garbage minutes and never would seriously see the court. That was until there were some injuries to stars like Derrick Rose, where Jimmy was able to finally get some actual rotation minutes. And as Jimmy does, he kept working harder and harder, and he eventually was given the starting job in Chicago, and from there, he never looked back. He became the star player for Chicago with Derrick Rose dealing with injuries consistently. But after a couple years of not really finding any success, the Bulls decided to go into rebuild mode. Now, with Jimmy Butler there, you can't really rebuild because Jimmy doesn't play purposely losing basketball. So he got irritated there and was like, "Hey, you guys don't want to win. I don't want to be here." And he requested a trade. That would land him in Minnesota, where he had a very talented team led by young star Karl-Anthony Towns. But very early, he noticed that this was once again a young squad who had interest in winning, but didn't care about winning the way Jimmy Butler cared about winning. So he requested a trade. So then he joined the Philadelphia 76ers, who was led by two young stars, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. Once again, he knows that these guys were not serious about winning. They kind of just used their talents to get to where they got to, but they didn't really want to grind and work. And obviously we know that as Ben Simmons' career has been up and down, you can see that a lot of them just relied on their talents. So Jimmy butted heads with a lot of those guys, and once again, he requested a trade. It was during this time where Jimmy Butler was starting to form a reputation around the NBA as being a locker room cancer, as a guy that you don't want to bring in because he doesn't play team basketball, or he cares about himself too much, or he has too big of an ego. But in reality, if you look at every single situation that Jimmy Butler requested a trade out of, it wasn't because he hated his teammates. It's because no one wanted to win as bad as he did. Either the organization didn't want to win, the coach didn't want to win, or his teammates just didn't want to win. He wanted to be at a place that they wanted to win more than they wanted to breathe. They wanted to win so bad, everyone was so bought in that that was the only thing they focused on. And there's only one place in the NBA that could fit the Jimmy Butler style of play. That was the Miami Heat.
I think I fit here, the way that they work, the attitude that they go about everything. It's me in a nutshell.
When Jimmy Butler joined the Heat in 2019, honestly, it seemed like a match made in heaven. You have a guy who has grinded his whole career, who's focused on only winning. He only cares about winning. And you have a president and a team culture in Pat Riley and Miami Heat who are about hard work and about bringing guys that didn't have big opportunities and working hard and winning championships. That's all they care about was winning. It was literally perfect. They paired him up with two young stars in Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, and the Heat rose to the top of the East very fast. In his first year, Jimmy brought the Miami Heat to the NBA Finals to meet up against the Los Angeles Lakers. After falling down 3-1, the Heat found themselves in a pivotal Game 5 must-win situation. It was here when we would see one of Jimmy Butler's greatest performances and one of the greatest performances we've ever seen from a Miami Heat player. He dropped 35 points, 12 rebounds, 11 assists, and 5 steals and played in 47 of the 48 minutes of that game. What Jimmy Butler was doing in that game was nothing short of iconic, and I remember watching it like it was yesterday. I was like, oh, can anybody stop Jimmy Butler right now? Because he is on a tear, and he did everything on that court. He was physically exhausted, which led to this moment where he dragged himself to the scores table, barely able to stand, and was breathing so hard you could tell that he had no energy left in his body. But it didn't matter because his team needed to win. He left everything he could on that basketball court. And the Miami Heat applauded it because that was Heat culture. What Jimmy Butler was doing was Heat culture. Pat Riley had found his guy. He has found his guy that was going to do whatever it takes to win. Although the Heat would go on to lose in 6 games, Jimmy Butler had solidified himself as a Heat legend. Over the course of the next few seasons, Jimmy Butler would have some of the greatest playoff performances we've ever seen. 7 out of the 10 best playoff performances in Miami Heat history were held by Jimmy Butler. Playoff Jimmy was a thing of legend in Miami. But there was no playoff run that tested Miami Heat culture and Jimmy Butler's will to win more than the 2023 playoff run. With Tyler Hero injured and 3 undrafted starters by his side, Jimmy Butler did what he did best. He put his team on his back. Miami was literally a play-in team in this postseason, and they actually lost the first play-in game. If you know anything about the play-in, if you're one of the top seeds, you have 2 games to win. The first game they were at home, they lost. That means they got another game. If you lose the other game, you're out of the playoffs completely. They lost the first game, and everyone, including me, was like, oh, they're done. They're done. They're over. And then they went on and they won the second game, but still they were the 8th seed to the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, Giannis ended up getting hurt in this series. Regardless, but what happened next was unspeakable for the Milwaukee Bucks. Jimmy Butler single-handedly willed this Heat team to a 5-game series victory over the top seed in Milwaukee Bucks. And his best game was his 56 masterpiece that he put on in Game 4. But that was the spark that they needed, and Jimmy led the Miami Heat all the way to the NBA Finals, where they would lose to the Denver Nuggets, who quite frankly just was too much for the Miami Heat. But they felt like they were just one piece away, that if Jimmy could just get one more star and get Hero back, that they would make another run at it next year. And to this day, Jimmy Butler is still waiting for that piece to come. Instead of going to get a star, Pat Riley and the Miami Heat decided to double down on Heat culture. A guy that a lot of people wanted them to go get was Damian Lillard at the time, and deal seemed like it was complete, but the Heat were unwilling to part ways with Tyler Hero, which would come back to bite them later on. But regardless, Jimmy kind of was like, hey, we need to get something going here, and they never did. Instead, they really just doubled down on Heat culture guys. They got in more players who were late first round picks or late second round picks, brought in more undrafted guys and tried to develop them and try to get guys who wanted to play winning basketball, but no stars, no guys that really moved the needle. Essentially, they basically started to fail Jimmy Butler, as you had the guy who's a perfect Heat culture star who is literally willing you to NBA Finals. And instead of getting him more help like any other star would ask for, you tell them no and you go get more guys that no one's heard of because they fit Heat culture. The culture failed Jimmy Butler. At the beginning of the season, Jimmy Butler came to the same realization that every other star that has went through Miami has came through. Heat culture and their loyalty is not what it claims to be. It's not about being loyal to the Miami Heat. In reality, Heat culture is about loyalty to Pat Riley. In 2014, when LeBron James decided to lead the Miami Heat after losing to the San Antonio Spurs, it was obvious to the basketball world that that roster was not equipped enough to win any more championships. So LeBron had 2 options, either stay in Miami or leave for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, Pat had a whole dynasty planned out that centered around LeBron James, but it didn't allow LeBron the flexibility that he wanted to influence who he wanted as a head coach or who he wanted to bring in as his teammate. So he left to join the Cleveland Cavaliers. A move that in hindsight made sense for LeBron's legacy, as obviously his 2016 championship really cemented his career. But back then, Pat Riley just could not believe that a star wouldn't listen to what he had to say. And this is what he said when LeBron actually left the Miami Heat. I was silent. I didn't say anything. My mind began to go, and it was over. I was very angry when LeBron left. It was personal for me. It just was. I had a very good friend who talked me off the ledge and kept me from going out there and saying something like Dan Gilbert. I'm glad I didn't do it. Now, quick history lesson. Dan Gilbert is the GM when LeBron was in Cleveland. And when he left for Miami, Dan wrote a very, very unprofessional and hurtful message to LeBron about his attitude and things of that nature when he left, because he was butthurt for leaving. And it's been criticized about how Dan said that and really ruined the relationship between them. Pat Riley was so upset that his plan was going to be messed up. He was essentially going to do the same thing when LeBron left Miami. But maybe this was going to be the wake-up call that Pat needed, and he was going to treat his next star right. Well, he didn't. Dwayne Wade in 2016 also came to the same crossroads when it was time for him to get a new contract. And Wade was literally the Miami Heat. They literally called it like Wade County out there. Everyone loved Dwayne Wade, and he really helped Pat Riley cement this Heat legacy and won 3 championships there. But when LeBron left in 2014, the Heat, instead of giving Wade more money, decided to give Bosh a max contract and then cut Wade's payments so they can add more players to the roster. Now, at the time, Wade was still being a team player and was okay with it. But when it came to 2016, he wanted his payment. He wanted to finally get paid what he felt he deserved. And at that time, Wade was a shell of himself, and Pat Riley knew that it wasn't good for the team to pay Dwayne Wade. So it was kind of this crossroads. Do we pay the guy who's been loyal and gave us 3 NBA championships? Or do we stay loyal to Heat culture? We all know what happened. Pat Riley chose Heat culture, and Dwayne Wade walked out the door. Internally, the Miami Heat staff knew this was a mistake, and they swore they would never make a mistake like this ever again with the star they had. So when Jimmy Butler came to the Miami Heat, they knew they had to make sure everything was right for him, and they gave him special treatments that they gave no other star in Miami Heat history, like allowing him to come to shoot-arounds late, or allowing him to fly on a separate plane, or just giving him certain privileges that stars never got in Miami. But despite doing all that, they still failed to give Jimmy what he really wanted, which was more help. Pat Riley in the Miami Heat looked at Jimmy Butler as an aging star who was good and talented, but they weren't willing to break up the young nucleus they had in Tyler Hero or Bam Adebayo to support him. Famously, back when they butchered the Damian Lillard trade because they didn't want to get rid of Hero. If it's not a benefit to the Miami Heat, Pat Riley's not doing it. And that's literally how it's always been. It's a sad reality of what Heat culture really is. Heat culture is not about buying in and working hard. It's really about control.
I don't run that organization as a player. So you get to that space sometime where you want to do things your way. It's Pat Riley way.
One of the most overlooked things about the Miami Heat is that Pat really runs this organization like a dictatorship. A famous Heat fan on Twitter hit it right on the head when he said, Pat Riley won. He officially got the fan base to think Jimmy is the bad guy. Hopefully, we can hang another banner for that, next to the banners where he showed Bron, Wade, and Shaq who's boss, winning feuds over championships. And that's in essence what the Miami Heat problem really is. Pat Riley is so concerned on making sure that everything happens his way because he believes he knows how to win a championship, and he does. But because of that and the inability to adapt to the times, Pat Riley is running the Miami Heat to the ground. And now you're seeing another star in Jimmy Butler walk out the door, and Miami now kind of stuck in mediocrity of what do you do from here?
Look what he's done to a star player since Heat culture started. He ran Shaq out of town. You ran LeBron out of town. You ran D. Wade out of town, of all people. One who drafted, who won your first championship with. Then you kind of try to make up for it. Now you running Jimmy Butler out of town. This, to me, tells me that Heat culture lives and dies with Pat Riley. And if he doesn't change the way he is, being, kind of like stubborn and don't want to pay guys and it's his way or the highway, then I don't see Heat culture being the same any longer.
The Heat culture system is actually very reminiscent to a story in the Bible. In the book of Daniel, there's a king named Darius who takes over the city of Babylon. And when he comes in, he has these very strict laws that he wants to set in place. And he tells Daniel that, hey, these laws are what we are going to abide by, because laws make sure everything's okay. Even me, the king myself, cannot go over these laws. These laws are word. Well, they ended up backfiring on him when he got tricked into signing a law that didn't allow Daniel to pray to God, and because of that, he had to sentence Daniel to death. Now, God ended up saving Daniel when he went into the lion's den, and King Darius ended up overruling the law. But this idea of system over everybody else that really got Darius in this situation in the first place. If he wouldn't have had these laws and the system in place, he would have been allowed to bend it and make it work for the time being, like when you have someone like Daniel on your staff. This is very reminiscent to what Pat Riley and the Miami Heat are dealing with, as they will never bend the rules or allow anything to happen as far as what the team should look like to help keep a star player. Instead, they consistently stay and stick to the system that Pat Riley built in 1995. So with Jimmy Butler officially getting traded to the Golden State Warriors, where do the Miami Heat go from here? In all honesty, I don't know. This team is not constructed at all to contend for any type of championship. They have a couple nice young guys, but in reality, they're not super young. Do you go into a full rebuild? Because Hero and Bam are both in their primes. I don't think they want to sit through another 3 to 4 years. I don't know if you can afford to wait 3 to 4 years to rebuild. Or do you go win now, which doesn't make sense because you didn't want to go win now when Jimmy Butler was there. But I think the bigger question is, what does this mean for Heat culture? Is this idea of getting these undrafted players, these guys that everyone looks over, and bring them into viable role players, still the formula to win in 2025? This culture that Pat Riley has built for the past 2 decades is starting to finally show cracks that everyone can see. Another star has been ran out of town, another championship window has closed, and at some point we need to start asking ourselves, when does Miami need to make a change? Maybe the modern NBA just won't work for the Pat Riley system anymore. And maybe he needs to be open to adapting and changing with the times. Or maybe Jimmy Butler just wasn't the right guy and they got to go find another Heat guy, which I don't know where you find another star player like Jimmy Butler that fits Heat culture. But that's kind of where Miami's at. Because despite all the words that the Heat culture is described as hardworking and all the training and the body fat, Heat culture was really built on one principle only, and that is winning. That's why LeBron James went there. That's why Dwayne Wade stayed for so long. That's why Jimmy Butler signed there. You have to win with the Miami Heat. And if you're not winning, there is no culture. At the end of the day, Miami Heat need to get back to winning, no matter how that looks and no matter who that's with. And if that means that Pat Riley needs to take a little bit of his pride down and not do it the Heat way, well, he needs to not do it the Heat way because their culture is built on winning. And right now, they're not winning. The question I want to leave you guys with and Pat Riley with, what is Heat culture and where do you go from here? Is it time that you step down? Or is it time that you adapt with the times? Let me know if you guys think that the Heat can turn everything around. They're in a weird situation right now. I don't know where they're going to go. And honestly, if I was a Miami Heat fan, I'd be very scared that this idea of Heat culture might have just ruined a good thing. Regardless, let me know if you enjoyed the videos. Leave a like, hit the subscribe button. And as always, God bless.